Well, viewership, we are back, and the only thing that Batman does not keep in his utility belt is something that we have just done. A mind-sharpening vial of Cointreau.
God, you two are embarrassing.
Oh my god, that reminds me. Have you seen, it's the Simpsons thing where they parody like the Adam West Batman things where Krusty the Clown plays basically the Joker?
That'd be terrific.
And
I haven't. I need
it's
to
like a
see
one-off thing where it's like, Batman's like, luckily I always carry my carousel reversal spray. And Krusty goes, geez, what don't you have on the belt? Patience for criminals like you. And it's such a good, like, tiny skit.
To sharpen our minds and get us back into things, the sprite, the Doctor and myself have just done a shot of Cointreau each, which Batman presumably doesn't keep in his utility belt.
Did you say Batman is like canonically teetotal?
Yes, he is. Like he would have to be, right? Although he has like an immunity or like a resistance to many toxins, so he might be okay with like. Okay, this is still doing his thing.
No, you can't. You battered him.
Oh, it's the audio recording I'm listening to.
Okay, cool, that's fine. Yeah, because you literally turned him into bat.
Let's see here. Alright, where are we going here? Arkham West. Right. Not to be confused with Adam West.
Very good.
So in the break, the Doctor did a whole bunch of reading because we were talking about it in the previous episode. We did a whole bunch of like discussion about the Batman film, Batman and Robin, which it's
you, Bard, have done a bit of learning on Miracle of Sound.
I have.
So
yes.
One of the interesting things about Batman and Robin was the first, until this day, the only Batman film to have, even as far as the writers' table, toy and action figure manufacturers were involved in the discussion of the plot for the film.
Wild.
Mr. Freeze's weaponry and armor was specifically designed by toy manufacturers.
That's actually kind of cool.
Which is really weird, though. Then Wikipedia follows that up by Bob Kane, creator of Batman, was also heavily involved in production and gave input on the script as well as on set.
Now, Bob Kane's a controversial figure in like DC Comics because like apparently there's another man, Bill Finger, who may have been the artist, but he's not adequately credited with helping to make Batman the
I know
character.
there's a bit of thing that historically illustrators struggle with credit in comics far more than writers did. Because I know Marvel had similar ones with Jack Kirby.
And Stan Lee, yeah. Because I know that like lots of writers will say like, oh, I told them to make this character this way, and then, but I mean, the illustrators, the guys drawing it, so...
Yeah, like anyone who looks at a finished comic thinks, obviously this is as much illustration as it is writing.
There's different...
Like, obviously the vision can be the writers, but someone's got to make it look like a comic book at the end of the day.
So there was a phenomenon in the 90s where, like, artists were actually much more prized talents in comic books than writers were, whereas the reverse is now generally true. And, yeah, it's a funny one. Like, they've gone through, like, there was the era in the mid-90s of the superstar artists, like, some of whom led to the very phenomena we've been talking about in the series with, like, the rise of Jean-Paul Valley and Azrael, and the Nightfall storyline was like largely like spearheaded by superstar artists. Well, we're going to just give you a little punch to the face, and then nope.
So I'm guessing most of the ones we've talked about, like Frank Miller, Alan Lee, not Alan Lee,
Alan Moore.
Alan Lee is a Tolkien artist, Alan Moore. They're all writers, aren't they?
Well, interestingly, Frank Miller wrote and drew The Dark Knight Returns, I'm pretty sure, or big chunks of it. Like, he's one of the rare double talents. His art's not brilliant, but it's evocative of his style.
But Watchmen what was the name of the guy who drew Watchmen?
Dave Gibbons.
Yeah, that's it.
And he worked very closely with Alan Moore. I've had to read through their agreement and how they were going to do things, and Alan Moore did have a very firm idea of exactly what it was going to look like.
That's the thing,
the palettes and the whole thing. It was
I consider myself I've got a pretty good visual system. I could just, if you gave me a good artist, I could describe visions of some of my D&D stuff to them, I think, really well in a way that would produce a really good final product. But no way could I do that on my own. I need someone who has got the talent to turn that into art. I can be as good of a describer and as a writer as I want. I cannot make that jump to actually turn this into...
Just so we're clear, that is closed mindset, and if you decided to take up drawing, I'm sure you could reach that level, but it's not something you're investing time into, and that's fine.
And frankly, at that point, you potentially want to support someone who is already good at that and wants to make that their thing, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Collaboration is much better.
It's also like, it's not necessarily as straightforward as that. It's not just like you describe it to them. You've got to get it done in a certain number of panels, and you've got to get it done to a budget.
Yeah, I think comic writing, the comic drawing, I think, is a real. It's much more complicated, as you say. Yeah,
absolutely.
Because I guess you've got to have the writing and the illustrations work hand in hand in a way that that works. Yeah, it sounds fucking stupid to say it like that, but you know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, yes and no. Some comic book writers are also the artists, and in most major productions, you'd actually have someone who does the lines, someone who does the colors, and someone who does the story.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is potentially a really controversial thing, but since we're at the point of actually, what is it to develop and produce a comic book in that way? What differentiates at this stage a comic book from a graphic novel?
It's a stylistic thing. Like
pretentiousness.
Arguably nothing.
Yeah, okay. I would say nothing.
I thought it was basically nothing in that way, but like there's nothing about like the way it's visually laid out or the structure of it that makes a graphic novel.
So
some people will go back and forth on it, but like arguably it's just a marketing thing because you can't reasonably market comic books to adults, but if you call them graphic novels, then people will buy them in bookstores.
I think of Watchmen as being like the archetypal, if not actually even the first, like.
So that did come out as comics, but it was intended as a novel.
Ah.
Okay, so one of the only definitions I'll accept of graphic novels is it has to be a coherent group of comics or larger comic.
Yeah.
So it has to be a full story, so it will be a bigger book rather than comics.
Yeah, because like Watchmen is like one kind of standalone story, basically.
It's an arc. So you can have some people who will group together a series of comic.
I've heard people refer to, say, Civil War as a single graphic novel.
No.
I've heard people say that.
It's a strange way to describe it to me, but
I've seen it sold as such as one book, Yay 30, that's all the Civil War arc. For example.
Like Barge. Do you remember the Dog Witch
Did you call
comic
Barge?
book?
Yeah.
Oh, I said Bard.
Okay, that's fine. Go on.
Do you remember the Dog Witch comics?
I got a minute. I'm almost as big as a barge.
When I was a boy, I'd eat 5 dozen eggs every morning to help me grow large. And now that I'm grown, I eat 5 dozen eggs, so I'm roughly the size of a barge.
I just tried to lean away from the earphones. They're in my ears. Also, lads, I fed you today. You haven't had, you've had a fifth of an egg. Now shut the fuck up. Bard,
yes,
you have read the Dog Witch graphic novels that I gave you.
I have, yeah. Really
Would you consider those 3 graphic novels?
I think there's, not necessarily, but I think there's more of a case for that being a graphic novel than something like Civil War.
Just so we're clear, it's the exact same thing. They were 3 separate seasons that were smooshed together into 3 graphic novels.
I've always heard, for example, I've heard Sandman referred to alternatively, like the original Neil Gaiman run of Sandman as being both a graphic novel and a series of comics.
Yeah.
And I guess that's conceptually basically the same thing.
So,
it's just marketing.
One of the only acceptable, to me personally, things that differentiates comics from graphic novels is comics can be released separately and can be completely individual. But if they're in a grouping where it could make a coherent book,
it's kind of a conceptual,
calling that a graphic novel. Yeah, I'm okay with that.
It'd be interesting to see what creators themselves think about this, because I know that Gaiman talks at great length about how he struggled with the notion of writing a monthly comic book series. So at least at the time he was writing it, he considered it almost like an ongoing story he was going to write for years, and he found that challenging as a writer.
Yeah.
Obviously, times have changed, and you might just contextualize that now, saying he was writing a graphic novel without knowing he was doing it, or without realizing that's what it would become.
Whereas you can get some air quotes graphic novels which have just series which have just been cut together, and
which
they
I think
don't
is what
follow a full story.
My ex, as they had one book of Civil War, which was thicker than any comic book ever was, and I think was just that arc put together and, as you say, assembled post hoc into a graphic novel.
But that is a full story.
Yeah.
Whereas you get some which just are a season, but they don't have a point. It doesn't have a theme throughout the season. And it
obviously,
doesn't end.
something like Watchmen has a fairly clear.
Yeah.
It's a single narrative.
Personally, I don't hugely care about the differentiation between the two.
I think we're kind of belaboring the point a little bit. You can go back and forth on it. Some people rightly claim, perhaps, that there is no difference.
And I'd mostly sit on that thing, but I want a graphic novel to be a coherent story.
Yeah, I think weirdly, the first I came across the concept of a graphic novel is that some people translate manga as graphic novel, as in literally the Japanese name.
Yep.
But then people have very strong opinions on what a manga is and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I love telling people that I watched manga recently. It really annoys them.
What would you use to do that to annoy people? Would you tell them that The Last Airbender is a manga or some shit like that?
No, I don't go into that thing. But yeah, whenever I've watched anime, I will just be like, oh, I was watching this manga.
Some of the Zelda books I have, like, you know, the Hyrule Historia and those ones.
Yeah.
Some of those have a manga in the back, and in some ways you can tell it's a manga because it goes the other way. Like, it reads right to left, and it starts at the back of the book and goes towards the middle.
Yeah. Also, Ivy's been here.
Yeah, no surprise that you like this bit.
I mean, remember Harley let her out?
Yeah.
So this is the Arkham Botanical Gardens.
Yeah, that's because this feels like the ones in Glasgow.
Yeah, it may be modern. I mean, like, just very close.
I mean, a generic Victorian, given the art style they've gone for, just generic Victorian botanical gardens. They all kind of look like this.
We've also discussed at great length. So, like, one of the most famous Batman comic book writers is Grant Morrison, who is actually Glaswegian.
Yeah.
He wrote a comic book called Arkham Asylum. Like, they shot the recent Batman movie in Glasgow. Like, this isn't difficult to connect.
Glasgow's a fascinating one just because I think Glasgow in some ways makes a perfect Gotham because it's got two things. It's got very impressive right era architecture and a grid system in its city centre, so it looks American.
Yeah.
So I think that's why, like...
And the Necropolis is amazing.
Yeah,
Necropolis
I can see why they were like, yeah, let's make that Wayne Manor.
Although I still need to go to the Southern Necropolis. I've not been.
There's another one?
Yeah, there's a Southern one I've never been.
As in, on the south side? Mm-hmm. Where is it? Okay, fair.
Sorry, I'm chasing my shot. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you remember it was when, I think we were in first or second year, did either of you go to see the production of World War Z that was in Glasgow?
I had a friend who was an extra in it.
Yeah, I went and saw it. I saw George Square done up as, like, post-apocalyptic. I think Philadelphia it is, or something like that.
I think so.
I've not actually seen the film, but it was cool to kind of, like, see it all set up. And then they did, what was it, recently? Indiana Jones.
Yeah,
because they did all the subway up. It's like all the subway stations were done up as like American subway lines.
So there's an important bit of visual like context here. So like the comic book we were just talking about, I'll show up in a second. But like Batman, Arkham Asylum, a Serious Health and Serious Earth, the one that was written by Grant Morrison. We've talked about it at some length on the channel. Blah blah blah. So this massive statue in the middle is a statue that appears exactly as it does in this game in the comic book. It's a statue of the Archangel Michael.
Has he got a big burning sword?
No, but he's besting the thing around him is the serpent, the dragon.
That's about right.
Which is meant to, I think in the novel, or the graphic novel, the comic book, whatever you want to call it, is a metaphor for like reason triumphing over, insanity, and various other things.
Angry honk.
Yeah. See, traditionally the go-to is, it's really funny. Like if you go to somewhere like Florence or somewhere that's big on its like Renaissance stuff, you learn really quickly to like spot the call signs of a load of bits of like Renaissance art, and one of them is if someone is depicting Michael, the Archangel, he's always got a sword that's on fire. If a guy is wearing no shoes and is wearing furs, it's your man who baptized
John the
Jesus.
Baptist.
That's the one. John the Baptist. Yeah. It's like if they're wearing blue or purple, it's Holy Mary. Not Holy Mary. Yes, Holy Mary, Mother of God.
Depends.
Go on.
Mary's almost always depicted in
Blue.
aquamarine, so that blue colour.
Yeah.
Unless she's northern, so Flemish, anything like that, in which case she's in red because red was the most expensive textile, whereas aquamarine was the most expensive paint. So it just depends on...
Do you mean ultramarine?
Yeah, that's the one. Sorry, ultramarine.
Weird to depict...
Robuta Gilliman.
It's weird to depict what?
Weird to depict like a virginal figure, we would think to modern sensibilities in red, isn't it? Because like we think
but that wasn't a thing until Queen Victoria.
I fully believe it. It's just strange because obviously we think of that as being like a sensual colour of passion or whatever, and that's not how typically
one portrays the Virgin Mary.
Exactly.
She's often portrayed as a very passionate and intense mother, or the best mother, or the idealized mother.
Yep.
So
blessed are you among all women.
It's the purity virgin thing is actually very low key in the importance until quite late on, but she's the best
mom.
Probably
around Victorian, you're right.
Whereas one of the main contributing factors to Christianity spreading so widely is because it was this something of being a mother is the most important thing, so women converted and taught their children.
Whilst Christianity isn't actually that big on like women's rights and stuff like that, it does prominently praise some women, which is a decent selling point if you can pitch it right.
As long as you're a mother and you're giving up your life for your child, you have a good place in Christ.
See also like, Batman's own saintly dead mother.
Yeah, I had a really good one recently. I was reading about how
Mary outlived Jesus.
How Christianity was first spread to the Vikings and like the kind of the Norsemen and the Saxons, and a big part of that is basically Jesus was portrayed as like a warrior hero who died for what he believed in, which is how it was pitched to them. It's like it's fascinating how the monotheistic religions replaced the polytheistic ones through essentially clever marketing.
Yeah.
I've read interesting analysis where people try to claim that instead of having like popular heroes like Achilles or Thor or whatever, like we now have Batman and Superman and Spider-Man. Like these are the pop cultural figures that basically form our modern.
But that's the thing, yeah. That need in people never goes away, and like there's no reason to think that ancient Greeks wouldn't have viewed the Iliad in the same way we view the MCU. Like this was like all the gods coming together for a crossover event. Like but it absolutely could. It's like a cultural phenomenon in that way. And it's like we find it's so hard to contextualize like what ancient religions actually meaningfully were in terms of a like day-to-day thing. Like we have a lot of ones like Sprite, because you were looking at recently because it was in the book you were reading, the whole Mithras thing. Mm-hmm. And it turns out we don't know much about that. We know that Mithras was this like Roman warrior cult that a lot of like soldiers would be part of, that was kind of like a weird secret society. But because it was a secret society, we don't know shit about it. We don't know what it actually did as like religious rituals. Were they religious in the same way that like the Freemasons are religious? The answer being not very. It's an interesting concept.
It definitely has religious elements, because this whole he lived in a cave. That's why you celebrate in the cave.
Yeah.
There's some weird things around.
But you can have like, I guess you can have the separation between like the culty stuff without it necessarily being religious in that way, if that makes sense.
I don't know. I think that people religiousize a lot of things. Like shopping is now basically a religion.
Speaking of like, here we go. I think this is meant to be the picture.
Speaking of Holy Mary, Mother of God.
Yeah.
Martha.
Are the Waynes like canonically Catholic?
I don't know.
Because a lot
of like the statuary and stuff like that has got strong Catholic vibes.
I wouldn't expect wealthy people in America in the 40s to be Catholic.
No, you're probably right. Yeah.
I think they probably keep it vague enough that it's you can fill in.
I mean, frankly, all of comic books of this era were written by Jewish people anyway, so it's unlikely to have been explicitly Catholic. Yeah, unless you were trying to make a point, which I think most of them weren't, or certainly not a socio-religious point.
Yeah.
I mean, like...
Because Bob Kane, I also literally just learned, was also, much like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, was also Jewish and changed his name to sound less Jewish to avoid his family casting him out for it. He was Bob Kahn, as in K-A-H-N, and changed to Kane because it sounded less Jewish.
I also know that... obviously, Superman is in a way like the ultimate immigrant, right?
Yeah.
He's an immigrant from space. I mean, like he's the ultimate outsider, but still embodies the American dream, which is one of the reasons why perhaps he was created the way he was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who came up with Superman?
I don't know their names. I know there's actually a big legal dispute as to who owns the rights to the character these days. I think it's quite contentious. Whether it's like the family of the creator, or whether DC of... Yeah. I think it's quite...
I mean, this Wikipedia certainly credits it to writer Jerry Siegel and artist Joe Shuster, that based on names alone are almost certainly Jewish.
Oh, they were. I think that's common knowledge.
What's fascinating to me, it's something that's never really discussed, is how like almost every significant superhero of the modern age was created by just about pre-World War II Jewish immigrants to America. Like, that feels like that's a hugely significant thing that's never really discussed much about, like, culturally.
It's important to note that those are the most successful superheroes.
Yes, there is that, but...
Oh, here we go.
We'll get FaceTime with Joker. This now, before it goes too far.
Stop. But everyone's dying to see what I do next.
Let him go.
That's the first time we've seen him since he fucked off on the gondola.
Okay,
correct.
If you say so, then. Whoopsie! No!
Feels like you could try a bit harder there, Batman.
Yeah.
You really need to speed things up, Bats. At this rate, you'll never catch me!
Now, there's an interesting theory.
I need to shut down power to this room.
That basically the theory is used to kind of it's hard to say this without it sounding vaguely conspiratorial, which is not at all. But for example, there is a quite high prevalence of, for example, Jewish people in Hollywood, and before that, the garment industry and stuff like that. And there's a theory that basically, in America specifically, Jewish people are kind of cultural outsiders, which makes them really good at spotting
I'm satirizing.
And spotting what's going to be a trend, what's up and coming, because they're a bit outside of the system. And it would make sense if, for superhero stuff, like the Jewish population were more able to perhaps pick up on what's the kind of cultural mood at the time and how to channel that through some of these things.
I think that's credible. Oh, Jesus, okay. Who definitely the Jewish people would not have believed in, but...
yeah. that's their thing, arguably.
I think that would go kind of both ways. Like, I mean, if I'm a Jewish writer in the 1940s, like, I would certainly want to believe in an invincible Superman that could save everybody.
Yes, there's one very specific reason you might want to believe that in the 40s, yeah.
Exactly, like... I mean, I think there's a really strong Jewish intellectual tradition in certainly the States, but like, beyond that, I would want there to be a saviour for my people in 1940 if I was Jewish.
Yeah. And I guess as well, you've got a lot of people who are immigrating to the States because they're immigrating from, a lot of Central Europe for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And so you have got more people who perhaps have got a creative background and need something to do in America. And that could be, writing comics, making films, that kind of thing, because this is stuff you're not allowed to do
back in the old country.
Exactly, yeah.